Real story of two most notorious serial killers in the history of America. Serial Killer 1. John Wayne Gacy, aka the Killer Clown. As a seasoned investigative officer with over 20 years of experience in serial killer cases, I've encountered many chilling stories, but few are as haunting as that of John Wayne Gacy. Known as the Killer Clown, Gacy's crimes epitomize the duality of human nature. How someone can wear a mask of normalcy while harboring unspeakable darkness. Here is the detailed narrative of his life, crimes, and eventual downfall. The early years. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, into a working-class family. His childhood was marred by physical abuse from his alcoholic father, who belittled him as weak and effeminate. Despite this turbulent upbringing, Gacy sought to prove himself, excelling in community activities and later becoming a successful businessman. However, beneath his outward ambition lay deep psychological scars. He struggled with his sexual identity and exhibited early signs of sadistic tendencies. These unresolved issues would later manifest in horrifying ways. A double life. By the 1970s, Gacy had established himself as a respected figure in Norwood Park Township, Illinois. He ran a construction business called PDM Contractors and was active in local politics. He even performed as Pogo the Clown at children's parties and charity events, a role that would later earn him his infamous moniker. Gacy's charm and community involvement masked his predatory nature. He targeted vulnerable young men, runaways, male sex workers, or those seeking employment, often luring them to his home with promises of work or hospitality. Once inside, they would face unimaginable horrors. The modus operandi. Gacy's method was both calculated and cruel. He would gain his victims' trust by offering them alcohol or drugs. Then he'd perform what he called the handcuff trick, convincing them to let him cuff their hands under the guise of showing them a magic trick. Once restrained, Gacy revealed his true nature. Victims were raped, tortured, and ultimately killed by strangulation or asphyxiation using a rope, what he chillingly referred to as the rope trick, to muffle their screams. He often gagged them with cloth or underwear. Afterward, he buried most of the bodies in the crawl space beneath his house. When it filled up, he began discarding bodies in the nearby Des Plaines River. The disappearances. Between 1972 and 1978, at least 33 young men and boys disappeared in Chicago's suburbs. Many were last seen near bus stations or heading to meet Gacy for job opportunities. Families reported their loved ones missing, but their pleas often went unanswered due to societal biases against runaways and marginalized groups like male sex workers. One early victim was John Butkovich, an 18-year-old employee of Gacy's construction company, who went missing after confronting him about overdue wages. His car was found abandoned with his wallet and keys inside, a detail that should have raised alarm but didn't lead to further investigation at the time. The turning point. Gacy's downfall began on December 11, 1978, when 15-year-old Robert Pius disappeared after telling his mother he was meeting a contractor about a job. That contractor was John Wayne Gacy. Unlike previous cases, Robert's family pushed relentlessly for answers, leading police to investigate Gacy more thoroughly. A search warrant for Gacy's home uncovered suspicious items, such as police badges and personal belongings linked to other missing young men. However, it wasn't until December 21st that investigators discovered human remains buried in the crawl space beneath his house, a discovery that shocked even seasoned officers. The confession. Faced with mounting evidence, Gacy confessed to killing at least 30 people over 6 years. He described his crimes in chilling detail. How he lured victims into his home, tortured them for hours or days, and buried their bodies under layers of quicklime to mask the stench of decay. Gacy claimed he sometimes kept corpses under his bed for hours before burying them, a macabre detail that underscored his lack of remorse. The trial. Gacy's trial began on February 6, 1980. His defense argued insanity, claiming he suffered from multiple personality disorder and that an alternate persona named Bad Jack committed the murders. However, forensic psychologists debunked this claim by demonstrating that Gacy's actions were premeditated and deliberate. Prosecutors highlighted how Gacy meticulously planned each murder, luring victims under false pretenses and taking elaborate steps to conceal their bodies. On March 12th, after only 2 hours of jury deliberation, Gacy was convicted of all 33 murders, the most by any individual in U.S. legal history at the time, and sentenced to death. Execution. While on death row at Stateville Correctional Center in Illinois, Gacy showed no remorse for his crimes. Instead, he spent his time painting clowns, a macabre nod to his public persona, and granting interviews where he denied responsibility or blamed others. On May 10, 1994, after years of appeals failed to overturn his sentence, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection. His final words were defiant. "Kiss my ass? Legacy." The case of John Wayne Gacy remains one of the most chilling examples of how predators can exploit societal blind spots to evade detection. His ability to blend into suburban life, hosting barbecues and performing as a clown, allowed him to operate undetected for years while committing heinous acts. The investigation also exposed systemic failures in law enforcement's handling of missing persons cases during that era. Many victims were dismissed as runaways due to their socioeconomic status or sexual orientation, a bias that allowed Gacy to continue killing unchecked. Today, advancements in forensic science have helped identify several of Gacy's unidentified victims through DNA analysis. However, 5 victims remain nameless, a haunting reminder of lives lost too soon. As an investigator who has studied countless cases over 2 decades, I find John Wayne Gacy's story particularly unsettling because it underscores how evil can hide behind the most ordinary facades. It serves as a stark reminder that vigilance and empathy are crucial in protecting society's most vulnerable members from predators like him. Serial Killer 2, Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer. For over 2 decades, the shadow of terror loomed over Washington state as young women vanished without a trace. Their bodies, often found along the banks of the Green River or in remote wooded areas, bore the signature of one of America's most prolific serial killers. Gary Leon Ridgway, later infamously dubbed the Green River Killer. As a seasoned investigator with 20 years of experience, I've seen evil in many forms. But Ridgway's case stands out for its sheer scale and chilling methodology. The beginning of the nightmare, 1982 to 1984. The nightmare began in July 1982 when the body of 16-year-old Wendy Lee Caulfield was discovered in the Green River. Over the next few months, 4 more bodies surfaced in or near the river. All were young women, many of them runaways or sex workers. The connection between the victims was clear. They were vulnerable individuals living on society's margins. The King County Sheriff's Office formed the Green River Task Force to investigate these murders. Early on, we knew we were dealing with a methodical predator. The killer would strangle his victims, sometimes with ligatures made from their own clothing, and then discard their bodies in clusters, often posing them in grotesque ways. This wasn't just murder. It was a calculated display of power and control. Ridgway's ability to blend into society made him an elusive target. To his neighbors and co-workers at Kenworth Truck Company, where he worked as a truck painter, he seemed like an ordinary man, a father, a husband, even a churchgoer. But beneath this facade lurked a man who harbored an intense hatred for women, particularly sex workers. The hunt for a ghost. By 1984, over 40 women had been murdered. The FBI's Behavioral Science Unit was brought in to profile the killer. Ted Bundy, already incarcerated for his own heinous crimes, provided insights into Ridgway's psychology. Bundy suggested that the killer likely revisited his victims' dump sites to engage in necrophilia, a theory that proved disturbingly accurate. Despite our efforts, Ridgway remained a step ahead. He was arrested in 1982 on a prostitution charge and became a suspect early on due to his frequent interactions with sex workers. However, he passed a polygraph test and was released. We collected hair and saliva samples from him during this period, evidence that would later become crucial. But at the time, forensic science wasn't advanced enough to make a definitive link. The killing slowed after 1984, but never truly stopped. Ridgway continued to prey on vulnerable women sporadically until 1998. By then, he had mastered the art of evasion, leaving investigators frustrated and haunted by the growing list of victims. Breakthrough. DNA Doesn't Lie, 2001. In 2001, advances in DNA technology finally gave us the break we needed. Semen samples collected from 4 victims were matched to Ridgway's DNA profile, using evidence we had preserved since his initial arrest in the 1980s. On November 30th, 2001, Gary Ridgway was arrested at his workplace. During interrogations, Ridgway initially denied involvement, but eventually confessed to murdering 48 women, though he later claimed the number was closer to 75 or even 80. His motive? He admitted to targeting sex workers because they were easy to pick up and less likely to be reported missing. He also revealed that he buried some victims' bodies later in his killing spree to resist the temptation of necrophilia. Justice and Confessions, 2003. Ridgway struck a plea deal to avoid the death penalty by agreeing to cooperate fully with investigators. Over months of interviews, he led us to previously undiscovered remains and provided chilling details about his crimes. He described how he gained his victims' trust by posing as a friendly, normal guy, sometimes showing them photos of his son or pretending to need help. In December 2003, Ridgway pleaded guilty to 48 counts of aggravated first-degree murder, the highest confirmed count for any American serial killer at the time. He received 48 consecutive life sentences, without parole, plus an additional 480 years for tampering with evidence. Reflections on evil. As I reflect on this case after years in law enforcement, what strikes me most is Ridgway's banality. He wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was an unremarkable man who exploited societal vulnerabilities and forensic limitations of his time. His ability to evade capture for so long underscores how much we've advanced in investigative techniques since then. But more than anything else, I think about his victims, young women who deserve better from life and from society. Their lives were cut short by a man who saw them as disposable objects rather than human beings. Today, Gary Ridgway resides at Washington State Penitentiary with no hope of parole. Yet his story serves as both a cautionary tale and a reminder. Evil can wear an ordinary face, and justice, though delayed, can ultimately prevail. If you want to watch more true horror stories, then do subscribe to Horror Vault. I will see you in the next video.